Hi, and welcome to Across the Desk. This week, we have Representative Collin Walke on the show today, and we're going to talk about the current legislative session that ended, the special sessions that are coming up, and what Collin Walke might be doing in the future, right here at Across the Desk. Collin, welcome to the show. It's great to have you back on. This is the third time I've had you on since I've been doing this, and you're one of my longtime recurring guests, and I love having you on. And now that I've said that, giving you all the accolades and everything else, what's been going on?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your show, and thanks for doing your show. I think anytime that we can talk politics in a long-form format, that's a good thing. Much better than 150 characters you get on Twitter.
I think so.
But, you know, we just wrapped up our regular session at the state capitol. And, you know, this session saw a curve in abortion rights that we have never seen before in the history of our country. So that was certainly a low light, I would say. Among other, you know, cultural war type legislation that doesn't actually get to the core of any of the problems facing our states. And then, of course, we have the Swadley's debacle going on with Governor Stitt and his team. And, you know, it's interesting because I do think the Republicans have a decent, viable candidate in Joel Kinsel, who's the current head of Veterans Affairs Director. Yeah. And but you know, no name recognition, no name ID. Exactly.
Yeah, I just saw a report from the Frontier where his staff, governor's staff, the current governor's staff, tried to have him, the guy that's challenging him in a primary, fired from his job.
Yeah,
which is
and you may or may not have seen it, but there was a story that broke, I think, in the wintertime about potential spyware being placed on Joel's computer.
Really?
By the administration.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was reported to the FBI. So I don't know what the results of that investigation are, but that was certainly the allegations. Yeah. And then, you know, budget-wise, you know, we set aside $700+ billion for Panasonic to come here, and that really prevented us from doing a lot of other good work, such as cutting the grocery tax, or fully funding education, or even getting people off of fines and fees and fully funding the DA system, whatever it might be. So that was a very disappointing budgetary item. And in fact, education really didn't see much of an increase in spending at all.
No, they didn't.
And so now we're set up for our next two special sessions.
Because he vetoed the budget, so now you got a special session coming up to handle that, is that right?
So what ended up happening was he did veto part of the budget, but none of the budget items that he vetoed we overrode. Instead, what these are for is because Governor Stitt had not spent a single dollar of ARPA funds, which ARPA is the American Rescue Plan Act under Biden, for which the state got in excess of $1.8 billion. We are now the 40th state with the least amount of spending because we've spent none. Out of that, well, we've spent some, but they've all been on consultants, not for actual projects. And so what we did was we took the power away from the governor and gave it to the legislature to determine where to award funds. So this special session started during the regular session, and what will happen is there's a committee right now between the House and the Senate that will decide out of the, I think there were like 1,200 projects submitted or something, out of those, which ones get funded by how much. And then they'll run a bill, so this will be like a 6-month-long process, but we'll go in one day per month. They'll run a bill that says these are the projects we've awarded to date, and we'll do that. Come in the next month, award more projects. So that'll be a fairly uncontroversial time, I think. But then, as you know, Governor Stitt called us into special session on June 13th. You know, if you would have asked me in the last 2 days of session whether or not we were going to do anything other than gavel in and gavel out, I would have said, nah, there's no chance. But now it does look like the Republicans are wanting to do some form of actual tax relief. One of which is the grocery tax.
Grocery tax.
Which I think
Democrats have been behind for a long time.
That's right. It's our idea. Yeah. They think it's popular, so they stole it.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's very concerning is the discussion of the cut of income taxes. And the reason is because, as you know, I came into office when we were in $1 billion budget deficit. For cutting taxes. And right now we're flush with cash because of all the federal money.
Yeah, the federal money that's coming in.
That's right. Just like we were post 2009 after the economic collapse there, we got a bunch of federal funding, which is why the Republicans always say, you guys talk about fully funded education in 2009, but that was a high water mark because of all the federal funds. Well, when the federal funds run out today, then in 2-3 years you're going to see a budget crisis here in the state if we cut income taxes.
Probably going to.
Yeah.
Exactly. And corporate income tax and everything else they want to do.
That's right. That's right. It's kind of astonishing to me. They keep saying that we need more taxpayers, not more taxes, and yet the legislation they run doesn't attract anybody to the state of Oklahoma.
I honestly, talking to conservatives, not that I do a whole lot, but when I do, it sounds more like just a political game for them. It's a way for them to get donations and votes if they say, hey, I'm going to cut your taxes, whether it needs it or not.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, damn the consequences. We're going to cut them anyway because you'll vote for me if I do.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, and that's actually a problem with term limits, because the reality is that most people can serve their entire time and not be too concerned about the long-term consequences of their actual votes. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a problem with term limits, right? So there's pros and cons to everything, I guess. Because we thought, hey, term limits would be great, because really we don't want these people in there forever, getting corrupt, because that's what happens when you're in there for 20 or 30 years like Inhofe. He's been so corrupted by the system now, he really needs to go. So term limits maybe, but you're right. Maybe not so... What are the term limits?
It's 12 years in Oklahoma.
12 years in Oklahoma.
Which, I mean, is a long time.
But
the flip side of that coin is I think the real crux to solve all of our political problems, not to be too boisterous about it, is to have actually fair elections through ranked choice voting, open primaries, areas in which the moderates, the 75% of the people, 75% of the time are the ones that choose, and not the extremists. Because right now, as you know, because of gerrymandering, we've drawn lines so that only the extremists voice.
Exactly. And well, gerrymandering's so bad because, like you say, man, the Democratic Party, and they did this year. I saw them. They went out, they recruited people. They went, hey, we need people to run, and they did. And there's about 50 districts that didn't pull anybody. And the reason isn't because they didn't work to try to get anybody recruited. They did. It's that those people get in there, okay, I'm going to run. They put together their exploratory committee, and then they quickly find out they're outnumbered 3-5, and no one will fund their campaign. And then they got to shut down the campaign because they don't have the money. And then people like Nathan Dahm just walk into office every time. And that's exactly the problem we have with gerrymandering in this state. Because as you said on abortion, right, we got all this abortion stuff going on, but the polls are like 75%, and that's among Republicans too, that we want abortion safe and legal, but you got these radicals in there, let's get rid of it even for incest and rape, and nobody's aligning with that. And when you see that kind of stuff, they're like, well, the legislature is like 90% for this, and you're like, but the people aren't. And you say, well, that's because it's been gerrymandered.
Absolutely, and I really think that the Republicans have shot themselves in the foot through this cultural war legislation, anti-abortion legislation. You may have seen the article that Tesla and Starbucks will spend up to $4,000 for employees to get abortions out of state. If we're trying to attract companies like Panasonic, the worst way to do it is by running legislation like we've been running.
Yeah, exactly. And it really harms because like women and the men who are married to them and have daughters, they don't want to come here if like, we're gonna put every OGBYN under a microscope and possibly on trial. Well, I don't want to do that.
I don't want my daughter to have less rights in a world than I had.
No kidding.
And I think that that's something that's becoming a reality for many conservatives who, identify as pro-life, but would be willing to give us some caveats to that, and recognize that this is far too extreme for where we are in today's world.
Exactly. So the regular session's over. It's been over for a little bit now. What's exactly come of that, or has anything come out of that?
I don't think that there were really any major as soon as I say this, somebody's going to point one out. I don't think we did any major structural changes or anything radically new. For example, like in 2018, I could have pointed to the creation of the Legislative Office of Fiscal Transparency, the LOFT, which at the time I was extremely skeptical of, and I still am to some degree. But they're the ones that first broke the Swadley stories. They're a bipartisan, just part of the House staff, and their job is just to make sure finances are going well. And they have done some tremendous work. Like that's a substantial, what I would say, structural change. I can't think of anything this session, and that's sad to say because I can't think of anything either bad or good.
Because one of the things that you were working on with Josh West was the
data privacy.
Data privacy deal, which is kind of scary now with the abortion thing because now they're saying, hey, ladies, they can track you.
That's right.
And they're going to.
That's right.
So that makes even what you did even that much more important.
So and on data privacy, we were actually optimistic we were going to get a hearing this session because there was a new committee chair.
Yep.
We had met with him. He wanted some changes, but I think we were going to get a hearing. But then when the educational savings account / voucher bill came up by President Pro Tem Treat, he voted against that, and so Treat removed him as the judiciary chair and replaced it with the old chair. And she, of course, doesn't like me or the legislation. Quite frankly, doesn't like Josh West either. But that's politics.
And there you go.
But I will say for you and your viewers, I don't know if you've seen the movie Navalny on HBO Max, but it's about Alexei Navalny, the Russian, depending on who you want to listen to, dissident or hero.
Yeah.
But he's the guy that Putin poisoned. He still survived. And then he voluntarily went back to Russia and was imprisoned immediately upon entry. But it is a life-changing documentary. It is a mind-blowing documentary because, getting back to data privacy, I kind of don't want to give this away, but halfway through the movie, through data privacy, or the lack thereof, he is able to actually piece together and figure out the 5 Russian agents who were responsible for poisoning him. And he prank calls them.
Oh, wow.
It is a phenomenal movie. Check it out.
What's the name of it again?
It's called Navalny. Navalny.
And where is it?
It's on HBO Max.
On HBO Max.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can probably find it out elsewhere, but it is fantastic, and it's also inspiring. Because it's clear that he is fighting for the right things. He's fighting for freedom. He's fighting against corruption, and the amount of sacrifice that he's put into where he's at. He's left his wife, his kids, etc. He's voluntarily in jail to make a point. And I think if we had more statesmen like that here in this country, who were willing to stand up against the corruption, that we would be in a much better place. So it's an inspirational movie. Check it out.
Okay, I actually will. That sounds like an interesting something that I would be into. So I definitely will. I encourage everybody else to go check that out too. Anyway, so now we got these special sessions. You said there's 2 coming up, right?
Well, we're in the one right now for ARPA funding.
For ARPA funding.
And then June 13th, we'll go into some sort of tax reform.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, yesterday the Democrats held a press conference and called for an expansion of that second special session on June 13th to include things for gun reform. However, this morning I was on a show with Representative Ryan Martinez, and he made it abundantly clear there would be no amending of the special session call to address
I honestly think, my personal opinion, I'm not a political guy, I'm not a politician, I'm more of a wonk, of course, got a show. But my opinion is the gun laws need to happen at a federal level. For me personally, state level, it's not going to do much because we got open borders with the other states. So to me personally, anything we do here is just going to be for show because honestly, it's not going to work across. It needs to be a federal thing, I think. States can probably do something, and I'm probably missing something here because I'm not a politician, right? But I think doing it on a federal level would be much more effective.
So, I get your point. So, for example, and I'm not a gun expert either, but it's my understanding at least that if I go to a gun show, I have much more accessibility and ease of purchase than anywhere else, right? It's kind of like the coronavirus when Mayor Holt was like, well, if we shut down Oklahoma City, well, what about Midwest City and Del City that joins us? We've got open borders, right?
There you go. It's kind of like the Chicago thing, right? Actually, the south end of Chicago borders Indiana, and they're like, well, there's Chicago shut down on but all these guns come from Indiana, and they're right there across the street.
And so I think it gets back to that point, though, as a politician, of maybe you can't get everything you want, because I agree, federal law would be fantastic, but you get some of what you want. And for example, a 72-hour waiting period instantiated in the state, maybe that would have prevented the Tulsa shooting because that individual bought it within 72 hours.
Yes.
But to your point, maybe he would have gotten the weapon somewhere else. But nonetheless, I think
that's the deal, right? So I just drove over to Arkansas, bought it, and drove back into Oklahoma. There you go. So to me, I see I don't know, and it's probably because I'm not a politician, and I'm probably not even on the liberal side of this either by saying it's not a state deal. I see gun laws as a public health thing more than anything else. But I also see that, I can see where states can do some stuff, and maybe that's an incubator for federal to take a look and see what happens, or other states even. But you're right. Since if we lock down on our gun shows, say Kansas or especially Texas, right? So it's almost not beneficial in a certain way.
No, I mean, I can certainly appreciate that. I mean, I think that we talk far too much about the Second Amendment rights, and we don't talk about the Second Amendment responsibilities.
Exactly.
And so, for example, I have a lot of very, very conservative friends who are gun toters. Who all thought that when constitutional carry came,
I own firearms.
Yeah, I own
several firearms actually.
But these people live and breathe it, right? I mean, I own several too.
I don't sleep with it. You know, I'm not a gun fetish guy, but I do own several firearms.
And they all said it was nuts to pass constitutional carry because they had been in concealed carry classes where people didn't even know like how to load a gun or anything, and now they can just walk around with a gun. Right, so even conservatives recognize that there's some lunacy that's going on right now.
Yeah. And they do that again to get campaign cash and votes.
Yeah, I mean it's because OK2A is a strong and powerful organization in this state, in spite of the fact that they shouldn't be. I mean, I find it so ironic.
Man, me too, because the guy who's in charge of that, Spencer, is that his name? He's such a radical. I mean, and a violent one at that. You see his Facebook post where he's talking about running people over with his car at protest. I mean, like, I want to run, but I think I should be allowed to run somebody. I mean, he actually posted this, and I was like, well, I can't believe the FBI isn't watching this guy. They gotta be, because of the posts he makes are so violent and just outlandish.
Well, and the thing is I don't understand why the Republican leadership in the House entertains his legislation, because right now he's backing several primary candidates against incumbents. So I don't know how the Speaker of the House can condone that type of behavior.
He must have a lot of power with a lot of people that vote, I guess. That's all I can think of. You know, that's it. Which is another thing I think of, like Democrats, right? Here's the thing, and I don't understand. I'm on the outside looking in. There's like a handful of Democrats in the whole of the legislature. How do you guys get anything done? And not only that, I look at like I see ads like from Jim Inhofe saying, hey, you know, if you're a Democrat, you're not in Oklahoma, which just tells me he thinks I'm not a citizen with rights and protections of law. And there's a lot of conservatives who think that way. How do you have a conversation with those people who can't even recognize you as an equal citizen?
Well, so the first thing I would suggest is that probably in the House of Representatives, there's 3 people that are that extreme. Everybody else is normal. Right? So first and foremost, I think that there's actually a lot of collegiality between the Democrats and the Republicans. You don't see it, but it occurs. The other thing that I'll say to that point is that Democrats accomplish a lot, you just don't know it because it's not newsworthy. So for example, either because of the legislation we passed, for example, Melissa Provenzano passed a bill, and this one is newsworthy. Representative Melissa Provenzano passed legislation this year to require mammogram coverages on insurance policies, things like that. Right. And so that's a big piece of legislation. But more importantly, there was a bill, for example, that came up for cockfighting, to allow cockfighting back in the state. And because of a Democratic amendment to that bill, it was past the deadline for the bill to get heard. So most of the times, the way that we kill bad bills is through procedure.
I got you.
Does that make sense? So in other words, you may never see that bill come up because we've already killed it. So we can do work. It's just mostly behind the scenes, and that's kind of the sad part is that most people are like, oh well, Democrats don't have a lot of power. Well, we don't have a ton of power. We got some
power. The power relies not in the legislature, but in the people. Kind of like the 2A's doing. That's what I was thinking. I was like, hey, that 2A guy, he's got the power of people and not the legislation. That's probably what Democrats ought to do, because you're not going to have power there. As a matter of fact, when I see a report that says, hey, you know what? I can't remember who it was, or what was the legislation. But anyways, there's a piece of legislation. It passed and everything else. But the guy, the Democrat, was the author of it, but told the Republican, no, you author it, because it won't go anywhere if I have my name on it. You know, so I look at that and I'm like, oh man, you know, so it's like when I see stuff like that, I say, well, that's because your power is going to be with the people, not with the legislature. Go out and talk to the people. Yeah. You know, that's why I'm like, how do you have a conversation with these Republicans who can't even accept you as an equal citizen? To me, that's just, I couldn't have a conversation with them. I would have preconditions.
Well, like I said, there are about 3 people that I don't have conversations with there in the House, you know.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap this up, I want to talk about your future plans, because this is your going to be your last term in office. Yeah,
I leave in November, one way or the other.
And do you have any idea what you're going to do after this, Collin?
I don't. I've tried to pivot my legal career towards data privacy issues. I'm volunteering for an organization called the Data Collaboration Alliance, helping them to build up a set of their data privacy database. But we'll see if that pans out or something else. I don't have anything lined up. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, he's got a gig lined up. He's going to go lobby. He's going to do that.
Lobby.
I'm not. But the one thing I can say is that I will continue to be involved in advocacy, continue to be involved in the community and politics, not leaving any of that. As a matter of fact, I'm starting to do weekly mindfulness sessions. You know, again, so you don't have to have a title by your name to do good work and to help, you know, your community. But I do honestly believe, now that I know how the sausage is made, I can actually be more effective outside than I can inside.
Yeah.
I see the world quite differently than I did when I came into office in 2016. And I think that's for the good, because I think that it will make me a more effective individual. Yeah.
That's great. I expect to see more from you in the future, even though you're not in office.
That's right.
I really do. Thank you, Collin.
Yep, thank you
for coming to the
Appreciate
show,
it.
being on here.
Thank you all for watching.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is Across the Desk. This is actually our last show this season, so we'll see you in about a month and a half, 2 months for season 6. Goodbye.